Frank Miller has consistently redefined the comic book medium throughout his career, with credits to his name like The Dark Knight Returns, Sin City, a run on Daredevil, and a character-defining limited Wolverine series. It's no wonder he's one of the most prolific creators in comics history. One of his most influential books would debut in 1983, blending cyberpunk, samurai myth, and gritty storytelling. Ronin. Now 40 years later, Ronin Rising attempts to continue that legacy, this time with Miller joined by artist Philip Tan. But let's not sugarcoat this. This sequel is a baffling journey that raises more questions than it answers, and leaves readers scratching their heads in confusion. So what happened in Ronin Rising that makes me question the creativity and writing abilities of one of the most prolific names in comic book history? Stay tuned to find out. Chapter 1, Demons and Sacrifices. So this story kicks off with Casey, a hardened samurai, and her young son, Billy. Could they have picked more generic names for these characters? As they flee from Virgo, an omnipotent AI turned demonic overlord. Virgo, rendered in a mix of organic horror and mechanical grotesqueness, rules over a world where humans willingly sacrifice themselves to feed her insatiable appetite.
Wow.
Casey tries to protect Billy from the horrors around them, repeatedly telling him don't cry. It feels like this should be a poignant moment, but it's a phrase that gets beaten into the ground by repetition, much like every other idea Miller has decided to include in this comic. The climax of this chapter is pure chaos. Casey faces off against Virgo, wielding her sword in a last-ditch effort. She attacks Virgo's monstrous form, but her strikes are useless. In a move that defies logic, Casey throws Billy, yes, her child, into the demon's mouth. Seems like a good plan. Then Billy somehow kills Virgo from inside his mouth with a makeshift blade. When he emerges, he's inexplicably older, now sporting a katana and a determined expression. No explanation is offered here, and the chapter ends with this bizarre transformation. Yeah, seems legit. And this whole scene sets the tone for the rest of the comic. Intriguing ideas and visually impactful compositions drowned in a deluge of narrative incoherence.
This is a damn shame!
And on to Chapter 2, Laser Eyes and Divine Declarations. Chapter 2 picks up with Virgo resurrected again, now claiming to be a god. She taunts Casey and Billy, calling them dust, and mocking their futile attempts to defeat her. Casey, still recovering from the shock of Billy's sudden growth spurt, watches as Virgo lunges to devour them again. And somehow this triggers Billy's newfound powers, and things get even more absurd. His body glows with energy, and he suddenly gains laser vision. Because why not? The lasers cut the Virgo demon in half, but she refuses to go quietly. Her last words? A bizarre insult involving her demon sphincter. Yeah, you heard that right. My sphincter tightens around you in contempt.
What is that actually happened? Of course it happened. I think this is a reflection of how...
Despite this comedic absurdity, there's potential here to explore Billy's powers and their origin. Unfortunately, the comic doesn't take the time to explain anything like that. Instead, it's more battles, more taunts, and more chaos. By the end of the chapter, Virgo dissolves into nothingness, but the sense of finality here is fleeting, and yet again leaves the reader thinking, what did I just read?
What do you mean? I don't get any of this stuff.
And now we're on to Chapter 3, The Ronin Returns. Well, kind of. Now the focus shifts to the original Ronin, who is inexplicably alive after his apparent death in the first book. He's locked in combat with Virgo, who has now decided to take her obsession to new heights. She calls Ronin her toy, her son, and then her lover. And then things escalate quickly when Virgo rips off the Ronin's arms and legs, and then his head, and carries his head around like a grotesque trophy. Then out of nowhere, she proposes marriage to his head. And when the head somehow rejects her, she declares that she's pregnant with his child.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
So, how? Well, don't ask. The comic certainly doesn't care to explain. And it's at this point that I feel like I've been the victim of some cruel joke. Maybe a bait and switch? Either way, at this point I was still confused, getting a bit frustrated, and about to stop reading altogether. Then the chapter ends with Virgo giving birth to a bizarre hybrid entity that resembles the Ronin. And this new Ronin is connected to her through pulsating biocircuitry.
It's science.
But the new Ronin manages to sever that bond, setting the stage for the next act. This chapter is visually stunning, but narratively incomprehensible. Gee, imagine that. And next we have Chapter 4. Casey and Billy face Virgo alone. I think. Chapter 4 shifts focus back to Virgo, who fully overtakes the Ronin, turning him into a weapon for her cause. Virgo begins explaining her warped vision of a great cleansing, claiming that the Ronin is the key to humanity's extinction and the rise of Homo Aquarius.
Ha! Gay!
What's chilling here is Virgo's tone. She no longer hates the Ronin, but is reverent, calling him beautiful and declaring that together they will save the world. It's deeply unsettling when Virgo shifts her focus to Casey and Billy, however, mocking them while pleading with the Ronin to abandon them and side with her instead. As the tension builds, Billy unleashes an ear-piercing scream, powerful enough to create a sonic boom. Casey and Billy, who are now riding, for some reason, in a futuristic taxicab, are caught in the chaos as the windows shatter from the force of Billy's outburst. Virgo then delivers one of her most bizarre proclamations, declaring that her child with the Ronin will be beautiful and lead her to victory. This moment is as strange as it is unsettling, adding another layer to her delusions.
Whack.
As Billy ages rapidly again, for some reason, he uses a surge of energy to make Virgo explode, because it's that easy. But her presence isn't entirely gone. Casey hears Virgo laughing, a disembodied taunt that makes it clear her influence persists. And then suddenly Casey's car explodes. In a desperate bid for survival, she grabs onto some exposed wires, but even this effort begins to fail as she notices that her fingers got no bones in them. Yeah, amazing writing yet again.
He ain't lying.
And then she's thrown from the vehicle and sent hurtling through the air. Now, Billy manages to catch her in midair, but Virgo's laughter continues to echo around. Casey, in an emotional plea, tells Billy to spare nothing and no one, pushing him to power up yet again for another attack. Billy catches sight of Virgo and then continues the chase. And meanwhile, Casey just continues to fall, and the chapter ends on a cliffhanger, as she continues falling with no one there to save her because... story, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that brings us to Chapter 5, The Ronin Strikes Back. Sort of. So Chapter 5 focuses on Billy and Casey's intense battle for survival, as Virgo's destruction creates chaos. To protect Casey, Billy surrounds her with a force field, shielding her from Virgo's direct attacks. However, Virgo, refusing to be defeated, lashes out, her shattered remnants becoming a deadly storm of debris against Casey.
A lot of suspense there.
And then Billy faces off against Virgo again, using his immense power to dismantle it piece by piece. But while this energy fights Virgo, the force field can't block every fragment of debris. Sharp pieces penetrate the barrier, cutting into Casey, who suffers increasingly severe injuries. And again, I'm wondering, what was the point of the force field if it wasn't going to work?
That's stupid! Use your common sense!
And as Casey lies bleeding, Virgo's disembodied AI voice taunts her again, except this time he doesn't mention his sphincter, accusing her of making a mess of things. Through what seems like telepathy, Casey warns Billy to ignore Virgo, reminding him that she lies when she speaks. The emotional moment underscores their bond as Casey struggles to stay conscious from her injuries. Now, if only this moment wasn't completely undermined by the terrible dialogue, we'd be in good shape.
That's right.
And finally, Billy catches Casey as she collapses, but her injuries are life-threatening. Then a medic robot shows up out of nowhere, introducing an unsettling new dilemma. Casey, who's distrusting of machines, fears it's another manifestation of Virgo. Billy reassures her that the robot is here to help, and the medic begins diagnosing her injuries, explaining she has internal bleeding and critical bodily damage. And for the second time in this graphic novel, the robot suggests integrating Casey with biocircuitry to save her life. Though hesitant, Casey agrees when Billy promises her that everything will be okay. As circuits weave into Casey's body, she and Billy argue again over whether the robot can be trusted. And this scene is supposed to build tension, but simply just annoys me with the banter between Casey and Billy being as redundant as it can get.
Boring!
This section concludes with a scene that shifts to the Ronin, who declares, "I am done failing." And that brings me to my final thought. I just wish Frank Miller was done failing readers with this awful script, but we have one more chapter to go. And now we've arrived at the final chapter, Chapter 6, The Final Battle. This final chapter is an all-out battle that's visually chaotic, but narratively baffling. Billy's powers reach their peak as he unleashes waves of energy that destabilize Virgo's core. Casey, now fully reconstructed, fights alongside him, delivering a series of action-packed panels that lack any kind of coherence.
Geez, that's too bad.
And then Billy delivers the final blow, causing Virgo and the Ronin clone to explode in a massive burst of light. And Casey and Billy vow to rebuild the world because I guess that's what you do when an evil AI destroys it.
Right.
This bizarre conclusion leaves more questions than answers. What does Virgo's destruction mean for the world? And what happened to the Ronin clone? This comic ends without addressing any of these questions, leaving the reader both confused, unsatisfied, and wondering why they just wasted their hard-earned time and money on this awfully written swan song.
It's been a waste of time for me, folks. I'll be honest with you. It's been a total waste of time.
So, Ronin Rising is a visually impressive mess. Philip Tan's art shines, but Frank Miller's contributions feel rushed and unfocused and make me question whether he is past his prime. Look, I never thought that I would or I could, from an objective standpoint, criticize one of the most influential people in comics culture. But here we are. This graphic novel is just plain bad. While the story is packed with some interesting ideas, they never get the attention they deserve, and the characters are little more than pawns in a convoluted game in which no one knows the rules.
That's a damn shame.
So if you're a diehard fan of the original Ronin or Frank Miller, you might find some enjoyment in the callbacks and visuals in this comic. For everyone else though, this comic is a reminder that not every sequel is worth doing or even necessary. And like the sphincter of contempt, it's bold, it's ambitious, yet utterly incomprehensible. So that wraps up my review of Ronin Rising by Frank Miller and Philip Tan. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this comic. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more deep dives into the world of comics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one when I review Abrams ComicArts' newest release, Dante's Inferno.